Alright, so I wanted to give you guys an update on the tank that had such a bad algae, mulm, and cyanobacteria problem. So it turned out it had a nitrogen crash, and I needed to add a whole lot more fish or nitrogen, or get rid of some plants, quite frankly. But I didn't want to get rid of plants, and this was a biotope tank, and now it's more of a biotype tank. And I say that because the plants that are back in there are not all from Lake Inlay, and now also I have Rhamnocentris ornatus from Siri Creek, as well as these gold ring danios, which are Southeast Asian, but they're definitely not from Lake Inlay. The thick-lipped gouramis are still in there. The rose loaches or rosy loaches are still in there. That's a male, and then there's a female swimming there. Also, the Lake Inlay red-tailed loach still in here. And so are the CPDs and the erythromicrons. They're just kind of shy with the Rhamnocentris. The Chopardanios are also still in here, although some of them did suffer a bit of an ailment when they were going through the treatment process that this tank went through. Also, there are some sparkling gouramis in here too. So it's a pretty full tank for a 22.5 gallon tank. But it's got immersed plants now, Persicaria that's going to be growing up out of there. I think that'll hold up better than the Bacopa did. The Bacopa will still be back in the corner and growing this plant over here. But I think it just outgrew the light too quickly. And this is a really fast-growing plant, the Persicaria genus in general. The Calagium species, though, you can trim down pretty quickly, and it will just kind of regrow. And it's almost like a weed. And so, really, I'm hoping that we can suck some of the nutrients out of the water quickly enough that the algae never builds up. But also I added some snails, and snails, I didn't have the species that were native to the region in Southeast Asia, Lake Inlay. So before I hadn't added snails, and I think the ram's horn snails will really actually help quite a bit in cleaning all these surfaces. They're already doing so. Now I dosed the tank with 1 packet of erythromycin, one of these API packets, and I went through 2 of them, but because I did it a week apart, I did it twice. And then I did about a 50% water change 3 days after dosing, and I also turned the light cycle down all the way to around 4 to 6 hours a day for a week, just kind of depending on the day. There wasn't any rhyme or reason to with that. There's a little erythromicron right there, which is similar to erythromycin, the med I use right here. Really what you want is a gram-positive bacteria or antibiotic to target gram-positive bacteria. And you can see, remember how much algae and just junk there was growing on this? I also cleaned that off somewhat. It's all still the same filter media, but the antibiotics killed all the cyanobacteria, and I have to continue to kind of watch it, because right where it's most oxygenated, where the filter intake is, see, there's still that kind of algae / cyanobacteria that was growing that at one point had taken up this whole tank. And now we are actually getting into a good phase, even though I know a lot of people would be frustrated seeing that you go from one algae to another. But now we're starting to see the diatom algae, the harder spotted or kind of like powdery looking algae on the hard things, as well as some of the fuzzy or filamentous algae growing here. And those are easy enough to take care of and to treat generally. I have plenty of videos on treating that kind of algae. It was this mysterious stuff that's almost completely gone from the open tank, this stuff here, that was just nasty, that was literally looked like death and decay with little fibers in between. It just would kill plant material, and then spread. So I also kept the pH down by adding some more botanical leaves and kind of tucking them into spots around the tank. And then the light, like I said, hasn't been on 12 hours like it was before. Also, I took some trimmings in the back and cut the tops off and then replanted, cut the tops off and then replanted over and over until we had this situation you see going on here. And I'll continue to do that and fill in pieces. In fact, I'll probably be able to cut the tops off these very soon. There's a few that just grow really fast. Same with over here, and you can see at which point the plants got CO2 in their life and started to grow again. You can see right here, this one at the fork, right after the fork is where it wasn't getting any CO2 and was having real problems. Then it got CO2, and now we've got really good growth at the top. We've got CO2 infused here. We've got a big container compared to the little containers I've used in the past on this tank. So hopefully we won't have to change that out for a few months, probably 5 months, 4 or 5 months at a time. And then the important thing here is going to be to continue to feed the fish, allow them to make waste and everything, but to not necessarily gravel vac where I disturb things, but to spot gravel vac any big curlicues of poo coming from those boys there, like that. Just like the one hanging from there. These gouramis go through a lot of food, and they make kind of a mess with their waste. And so I want to make sure to not let that build up as fuel. Now, also what's going to help is I introduced some Malaysian trumpet snails, again, not from Lake Inlay, but they always serve me well in other tanks. And these guys are going to clean the plants down low, and they're going to go into the substrate at night. And you can already see where this had a lot of cyanobacteria growing before. We still see a little bit over here where you can see that kind of greenish blue hue. But now with those snails, they've been aerating that top layer. And with the CO2 and the snails and adding nitrogen in liquid supplemental form, as well as potassium in the form of liquid potash, I've been able to kind of revitalize and oxygenate this top layer of soil that was getting kind of anaerobic or at least low on oxygen. And doing that then allows it to be a growing place where the tap roots aren't necessarily growing deep down into this rich nutrient layer unless they're of the larger plants. And they'll do that once they're really established, but all these little carpeting plants, they're coming back and filling in, and they're the ones that are going to take advantage of that sand layer and keep oxygen throughout it just by virtue of roots bringing oxygen with them in all plants. So also I planted a few new crypts in these I can't even pronounce the name, Svidani. I totally butchered that, I'm sure, but they're these long, crazy crypts that just are, I mean, you can see that they just grow like insanely, and I put them in there yay tall about 2 weeks ago. So this has been a journey that has taken about 2 weeks from its worst to where we're at now. It's not over. I probably will cheat and use just a dose of Flourish XL to treat this spot algae here. Normally I would use shrimp or something like that, but the biotope doesn't really have shrimp in it in any meaningful way from what I know in the lake. And then, you know, normally carp would be eating a lot of the algae too in a big biotope on the lake, as well as a number of other fish that just are not present. I don't have the space for them. And so it's not a truly functioning biotope, and hardly ever do you get a tank set up so that it is. But we do still have these beautiful red-tail inlay loaches, the pair that's doing their thing, and they're kind of coming and going, hiding in the rocks. And then the Rhamnocentrus really do add just kind of an elegance with the iridescence and stuff. So they kind of add this elegance that I really like, and they just kind of skate through the water really nicely and add motion to the tank, kind of like Danios do. And originally I thought these gold ring Danios would be doing the same. They're one of my very favorite fish. Definitely probably up there in my top 3 favorite Nano fish. They're just a beautiful, beautiful fish, really elegant and simple, yet when you stare at them long enough, you start to see traits that are just beautiful and iridescent and metallic and shimmering. Just really cool fish. And they are from the mountains near Lake Inlay, about 30 or 40 miles away is where they start their range. So I don't have a problem putting them in here either. But what's going to really be key is the light cycle, the water changes, and making sure that the biological waste is not building up. Just like before, where we had all that molmy algae and dead plants. And that's because the tank lost nitrogen. Then the plants began to fail, began to lose their leaves, or rather they prioritized which leaves to keep, which they decided would be the top ones near the light. And as they lost those, they started to fall and decay and encourage that algae growth. And now that we've gotten a lot of that out of here and cleaned up, it should be a lot easier to stay on top of. One fun thing about the Rhamnocentris too is that they turn color throughout the day, which also the gouramis do, and also the rosy loaches do as they're showing off for one another for mating. They're just really pretty fish, and everything in the Lake Inlay complex has red and black or orange on it. So I thought that these Rhamnocentris would fit in just fine. Other than that, I added some red root floaters. They don't like having nitrogen in their water column much, and that's why they're not doing their best. That's why they're kind of bleached out. Even though this light's very, very intense and the tank's pretty shallow, they're just not gonna flourish well. But they're kind of in here for now until we get a big wall of plants going, and then I can dose with liquid fertilizer daily. I can dose the nitrates, ammonia piece of the equation, either through the root tabs or the matured soil, because remember, nitrites and ammonia aren't good for your fish. Well, neither are nitrates in high levels, but nitrates are tolerable to fish. So we'll put the nitrates in the water column and continue with the potassium and make sure that none of the phosphate or other things like the nitrogen itself get too out of hand, because that will sometimes cause the algae to do so as well. So in any case, I'm pretty happy with where it's at, and yet I'm getting ready to go back to Florida for about a week and a half, and I have no doubt that I will come back to at least a mess half as bad as the one before. Hopefully not quite as bad, just because I won't be doing water changes, and my wife will be here to turn on and off the CO2, hopefully. But the other thing about that is I like to have a hang off the back filter, and I may even get a larger one on a tank that's running CO2, especially at this rate, which is about a bubble per second, maybe a little faster, because then it keeps the tank aerated even if someone were to forget and not turn that off. Now, when that's happened, I've seen the fish all scoot to this side, and gouramis, they can breathe from the top, and then luckily a lot of these other fish can actually tolerate low oxygenated water, but the Rhamnocentris won't do well with that. So they're a little more fragile in some ways, nor will they like high nitrates. So our nitrates are hanging around 10 parts per million in the morning when I dose it, and by noon it's gone again. So we might try to find a time release nitrate solution to all this too, that's not going to create biomass waste that will then just turn into algae. So stay tuned, and I will give you guys further updates in the future. But I hope you guys have a good one and learned a little bit from this nitrate crashed and now recovered tank. I'll talk to you guys later. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you want to keep track of these videos, and if you want to support the channel, get extra episodes, 20 a month or so, all audio, then check out the membership or the join tab. Only $1.99, and it really helps out the channel and me to keep doing this full time. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.